What's up, everyone out there in YouTube land? I am Perry Lovewhistle.
And I am Titan Reaver.
And first of all, we are in our new studio, right? 50 subscriber special. We upgraded, got a whole new studio.
The Q&A session coming up.
Yeah. Today we are going to be covering our lessons learned from my first year and Titan Reaver's first
6 months.
6 months of trying to fly quadcopters. First of all, I want to point out that we both followed Joshua Bardwell and Mr. Steele's video series on how to get into FPV and a lot of the tutorials for things like setting up beta flight. Those tutorials are great, and I'm going to link them in the description down below. But those guys have been flying for a decade, maybe. Yeah. So there's lots of like really basic 100 level stuff that they completely leave out, and they kind of kicked us in the teeth.
Yeah, it's easy to forget about when you forget that you're not actually starting.
Yeah. So so this is the lessons learned / getting into FPV supplement, right? This is sort of a supplement to those videos.
We're just talking about the gaps in between that we found.
Let's start with step one. Both of their videos will tell you step one would be grabbing a transmitter, which we have actually come to disagree with.
A little, yeah.
And we don't unfortunately have it with us. So,
because the other option is, instead of going immediately to hobby grade electronics, is to get a toy grade quadcopter. Like, yeah, they don't fly like a real quad, but they do move in the air, and the sticks do mostly the same things. So you can go out for $50.
We lucked into like a 2-year-old $50 Target quad. And so it's old technology, it's cheap, but it's all together, right? You get a transmitter, you get a quad. It doesn't have acro mode, right? It's auto level, but it still controls the same as a hobby grade quad. You don't have to go through all of this nonsense that we're going to explain over the course of the whole video to find out that you don't want to fly quads, because you may end up getting into the air for the first time and not liking it. And if you've only bought a $50 quad, then that's it.
Yeah, so the particular brand that we ended up having in my website is blocked.
You know, if a website is blocked in your area, you could use NordVPN.
It's true, Tunnel Bear, one of those. I think people still talk about that one. Yeah, but the Sky Viper is the brand that we found, and it's $49.99 for the 016010 HD, and it has the ability for you to see FPV. It comes in on your phone, which sits on the controller.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna link this down below. I'm gonna make a bunch of links down below. I'm obviously not sponsored by anybody, so those aren't affiliate links or anything, but they are products that I recommend getting that no one else is going to talk about, right? None of the professional quadcopter pilots are going to tell you go to Target and get a $50 quad. That does come up a lot on the forums, by the way, if you look on the forums. But if you're looking on the forums, then you probably aren't watching this video. So
that's true. Yeah, because you may have not needed these lessons learned.
So I guess, real step one would be go get off of YouTube and find real
related websites.
Okay. Step one, cheap quad.
Cheap quads.
After you've got your cheap quad and you've flown it and you've you know what, this is awesome, but I want to go bigger, I want to go faster. That's great. But first, quick check on knowledge. Do you know how to and have the equipment to solder?
If not, learn to solder.
So, first of all, we know how to solder. But you don't have to solder on that level for this hobby, right? Most often what you're going to be soldering until you get to the point where you're building your own quads from the ground up is going to be battery connectors, which is really just a matter of getting something really hot and filling it with solder, which we have a video of us doing that, not well, but good enough.
Good enough to fly.
I am going to link my digital soldering iron. If you do an Amazon search for digital soldering iron and buy the cheapest one, you will get the Sigma 60 Delta, all right? Which is exactly what I did, and it has worked wonders for me for years.
Yeah.
It's super cheap. It is digital. The instructions are in Chinese, and the temperature readout is in Celsius. So
That's a simple 9/5 plus 32 conversion anyway.
duh. Get a soldering iron. Learn how to solder. Practice on things that aren't $300 quads before you start working into that nonsense.
Now, the only, I mentioned this before, the only real thing that you need when it comes to this is a temperature readout and the iron attached to it. Honestly, everything else, you can go up to the full-size workstations, heat stations, like the pace unit, but this is fine.
I have a lot of things in my soldering kit that make soldering very easy for me. It's not necessary, right? Hot metal solder, use 6337 solder, only 6337. Doesn't even matter if it's the cheap brand, does need to be eutectic. So now you've flown and you've verified that you know how to solder. Now it's time to get actually into the hobby, and now we're going to get to the same step one, which is get a transmitter. And this is where it starts getting into the other part of this video, where the hobby is changing rapidly. I got into it about a year ago. Titan Reaver got into about 6 months ago, and over the course of that, and pretty much for like 15 years prior to that, the recommended first transmitter was the Taranis QX7. And it is a very powerful transmitter. It has a few drawbacks. There is a video about all of this stuff. Like, it can do anything with the right attachments and kits. And once you have all those attachments and kits, you end up with a whole bunch of nonsense. Recently, and so this is currently early December 2019.
Yeah.
And there's recently been a new transmitter that's come on board, and even the pros are all switching to it, and it's cheaper than the Taranis QX7, and in every measurable way better. It's basically this with all of the extra mods and kits put into it. Namely, the most important thing from my perspective as a 1-year veteran is the multi-protocol built into it.
Yes. So that's well, one thing. Things do get cheaper and better over time. So, like, if you're watching this, there may be a couple years from now another option that's better than that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that saves you another problem. That particular multi-protocol module. So I don't have it installed at the moment, but I had to buy a separate module for my Taranis because sometimes ordering things on the internet is hard. And when we get to later, the actual toothpicks, I had an error. But I also wanted to talk, so there's a couple other options that people don't talk about as much. And that's the real low-end spectrum of the transmitter market. Like, I have the FlySky FSI6, so 6-channel receiver. And this one's like $40, I think. So if you are getting into the hobby and you don't really know if you're going to be in for a long time at this point, if you're willing to spend a little more money, I do think it's not a terrible idea to go that you don't need one that is capable of living the rest of your life and has 16 channels for everything. You can get one that has 6 and will fly the quad.
Also to note, the FlySky also makes cheaper receivers, which is great if you're like not talking about quads and airplanes and stuff like that, but if you just want to get into robotics in general, maybe like building a battle bot, right? You probably don't want to have an $80 16-channel S-bus receiver on something that's going to be in front of a buzzsaw.
So yeah, it's like FlySky receivers for 2 6-channel receivers. It's like $8.
Yeah.
And they do work well with planes and things like that too.
Yeah. So if you're gonna get into the homebrew stuff but you still want to save money, we wouldn't have ever gotten this had he not made the mistake and gotten on with the wrong receiver.
It's true.
But now that we've got it, that's a lesson learned. Like I would have now looking back, I would have been just as happy flying my micro quad with that transmitter. I wouldn't have known the difference.
You're not going to. And that's like in the beginning, nothing is high fidelity enough for you to know the difference. So people will talk about the like response range of these high-end things, but you're not going to know when your thing is this big flying through your house crashing into stuff.
Which also gets us into the very next like sub point of the transmitters, because you're going to get this transmitter. It's going to be this really nice professional grade transmitter in the mail, and this is going to be the first time that you really have to face the fact that these are not toys. This is not user friendly. It's going to be complex from beginning to end, because if you open up the back of that one, hey, look, AA batteries.
AA batteries.
The Taranis QX7 comes with a completely empty slot back here with a balance plug connector. So they're just like, okay, hey, grab one of your 2S lipos and plug it in. So I got this in the mail and I couldn't even turn it on because I had to get a lipo battery, which meant I also had to get a charger.
Yes.
So now that begins the charger discussion, because once again, when I got into the hobby, the charger everyone was recommending was this one, the Tenergy TB6B. And this one does come with everything. It comes with lots of cool stuff that we're going to talk about in just a second. But now you can get the Toolkit M6 for less, and it does more. And as you can see, old, new. But there's upsides and downsides to the whole thing, because the Toolkit M6, all of its input and output are both XT60. They clearly are geared towards quadcopter pilots, because everything quadcopters is XT60, right?
Yeah. On full scales.
Yeah. When you're talking about airplanes, cars, stuff like that, there still is a lot of different things. The Futaba connector is still big in cars.
Yeah, the CT5 connector is taking over a lot of things.
But quads, it's all XT, right? XT60 for big stuff, XT30 for tiny stuff, which we'll get to that in a little bit. Our first video together was working on making a power supply for that, because that's
things it does not come with.
One of the lessons learned that no one talks about is turning this on. So, you get your transmitter, it doesn't have a battery. You get your battery, you don't have a charger. You get your charger, you don't have a power supply. You make your own power supply.
Aha!
And now you can turn on your transmitter, right?
If the battery has the right kind of connector for it.
So
tangentially is wild.
Yeah.
And then if it doesn't, something else that you need, which this kind of came with, and with like a bunch of options of things to plug into it.
Yeah, and this was a big thing before the M6 took over. The output of my charger is banana plugs, so you can buy a lot of these like multiple banana plug pigtails, which allows me to charge a whole bunch of different batteries. None of which I use, by the way. It's what came with this, and I just connected a XT60 plug to it.
Whereas, so for this, since the output is XT60, you can get other adapters, like this one, which goes to XT90, which I use for my large terrestrial RC batteries and such. Or if you have anything else that you're trying to charge, you're going to need something like this on the output of it.
There are some other options for powering your transmitters. The QX7 used to come with a 6AA tray. It doesn't even come with it anymore, but you can still find it. We're also going to talk a little bit about 18650 lithium batteries a little bit later, but if you get a LiPo charger now, you're going to need LiPos for the quads. There's no way of getting around that. You can get around the LiPos in everything else, but not in the quads. So you will need a charger eventually. Like I said, we're going to come back to the battery thing. The whole purpose of getting the transmitter is getting a simulator. So we have to talk about the simulators, because we both went a different route with the simulator, which was almost completely up to chance. The two major simulators right now are Velocidrone and Liftoff. And I ended up going with Velocidrone mainly because that was the one in the Mr. Steel video.
And I went with Liftoff because it was in a Zoe FPV video. And
So what we've noticed is the main difference between the two of them is Liftoff is a very broad simulator.
yes.
It's got something for freestyle, where you basically, it's got like a Tony Hawk style
Trick calculator, yeah.
which is really cool, and a bunch of other stuff, and it can be set up to do 3D,
Right,
which
was important to me.
to my knowledge, Velocidrone doesn't, because Velocidrone is a racing simulator, and that's what it does, which is great. You know, all the pre-made courses are tight hairpin turns. They really force you to learn the nitty-gritty skills required for racing. But if I want to freestyle, what I've got to do is go into a course and then just not race it.
Yeah, so I can go to any level in the simulator and just not have a course there at all, and I will turn on like God mode, and you can fly in the sim for hours without, you know, there's no battery calculation or damage or any of that kind of crap. So it allows you to really experience all the different things that you want to do. Now, there is something to having a course, because if you're just flying around doing nothing, you may not actually be like practicing anything. And when you have like a course in front of you, it forces you to go, oh, now I need to know how to do X.
It's the difference between like self-guided study and formal education, right? Yeah, like just having the freedom and the access to the materials may not work for you.
And the other thing that's not always talked about is one of the issues with the simulator is that you're looking at a screen in front of you, so it doesn't really give you the FPV experience. But something I already happen to have is the Royal Moon mobile theater. What it's called, Royal Moon theater player, and it is not a VR mask. Instead, the screen in it is very similar to, well, they're OLED displays, so it's similar to like the higher end goggles. But it doesn't move when you move your head, just like a goggle doesn't. And you can connect HDMI to it because it has the converters that it comes with it. And this allows you to get that experience of having a goggle on your head, but it's also powered, or can be powered, through USB, which means you can have it on your head for an hour. Now, if you're using any screen on your head, you should take it off about every hour, or else your eyes will melt out and you die in your sleep, I think.
As far as I know,
the thing tells you to take. Anyway,
there's a warning right in the beginning.
Right in the beginning, and every hour it tells you. But so I like this because if you're using your goggles, which is another option, as your screen, you need an adapter that you probably don't have, and you need a battery to power it that is not infinite, whereas my laptop powers on the wall, so it's basically infinite.
Let's talk about connecting your transmitter to your computer. There's two ways to do that.
So one is through a direct cable. So the Taranis QX7 uses a mini USB cable. You may have seen these around 30 years ago, and they still exist now. Or you can get a USB dongle, like this one, which is typically made for that transmitter. So like this is made by FreeSky, or FrSky, or say the name, which is convenient because, well, some of these require a special cable, but if you don't have the mini USB cable, it's no different. You just have to buy a cable. Make sure it's the right one. But anyway, one thing is that when you're doing this, Windows, if you're using a Windows machine, likes to update periodically. And in one of those updates, it changed a random driver for USB devices that made this method more difficult.
We're not going to go into that here. There is a solution on the forums. If you really want to see us make a video about fixing that problem because you don't want to get the receiver, which I don't because I'm a cheapskate.
Right.
So
I bought it and then figured out the solution, and so now I have it.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want to see a video explaining that, we'll link it down below. So get the transmitter, get a way to connect it to your computer, get batteries, get a battery charger, get a power supply for your battery charger. Right. This step ends up being the other videos just gloss over it. Like the transmitter step is going to be just nothing.
Yeah, they just say, get the sim, connect your transmitter to it, and start messing around with the sim.
Yeah. Yeah, so, and I guess that's another thing. If you want to see just a video of us connecting the transmitter to the sim, yeah, leave a comment below because we'll do that too, because that was probably the most painful step of this whole process, and it's like a footnote in all of the professionals' videos.
Which we are not.
Which we are not. Let's stress that. We are not professionals. Now you've got your sim, and absolutely spend a lot of time in the sim, hours. How much time do you practice a day?
About an hour and a half, at the minimum of an hour, and then I try to get 2 hours, but an hour and a half on average.
Now, just really quick, would you compare learning how to fly a quad to learning to play a musical instrument?
I would say it's very similar. I would say it's like learning any kind of task. Yeah, you need to practice, but you also need. The reason I said I have a schedule is the same way that I do learn an instrument, which is what I studied was music theory and for a long time. And you need to know what you're doing wrong, and you need to have something that you're doing, but it takes a lot of time, and it's going to be discouraging. The first week that I was doing this, I could not move between like 2 buildings that are a building length apart, and I couldn't figure out how to that yaw existed. I guess
yeah,
it's like you just kind of forget that.
Actually, we're gonna make a whole separate thing for a lessons learned. I just want to let yaw be its own block over here.
And then the other thing is, just like learning an instrument, you're going to see a lot of videos or people talking about the way to do it. And this is how you hold a trombone. Like this is exactly where your hand is supposed to go, and this is whatever you're doing, things like that. But if you've ever played an instrument, after a while, you're gonna do it slightly differently than somebody else is. If you play the trumpet and they say never blow out your lips, things like your cheeks rather. I mean, Dizzy Gillespie did it, and his cheeks were always puffed up. So you learn how to do it, whatever you're going to do. And in the sim, I was trying to follow exactly the way that people say to do it, and I realized I just don't like doing that. I don't like camera tilt, for example, because a lot of the videos that I saw were this is what you should be doing. This is what your rates should be set to, all of that type of thing.
Yeah, the other thing that we've kind of learned is this is a relatively small hobby. Part of the reason is because it's so difficult to get into, which is what this video is all about. But the result is, it takes a lot of people doing something to make hard rules of what should happen at different points, right? Like the strategies in sports didn't really exist until the sports became national pastimes.
Now, that's not to be confused with now, you should still listen to what those people are saying. There's a reason that they hold the transmitter the way they do or set up the quad the way they do. But they're not hard and fast rules most of the time.
Yeah. So anyhow, you're flying in the sim. Once you got into the point where you can pretty much trust that you're not going to wreck, now it's time to get a quad. And the pros also say start with a micro, and for reasons that are actually new since the last videos were made. Because the FAA just put out new regulations over the course of the last 12 months, and it even more stresses the need for a micro, because if you have a quad that is less than 0.55 pounds, you don't have to get it registered, which is just another barrier to entry. And we'll cross that bridge later. I haven't even crossed it yet, because honestly, it's difficult to register a quad that's less than 0.55 pounds. I tried to, and they're like, "Are you sure?" But anyhow, it's only $5, and this also gets to where there has been a difference from 12 months ago to now. 12 months ago, the Eachine trash can was all the rage, and it's this 1S/2S micro quad that you have to do some modifications to run it off of 2S's with XT30 connectors, and it's really super durable. I will tell you, we have both wrecked this thing to high heaven, and it's still running fine. Like, some parts have fallen off, but I've hot glued them back on. So if you're worried about a micro quad, like you think you're just gonna destroy it, don't be. They make these for beginners. But even since this, like pretty much a week after I bought this, there was something that came out that already had a bunch of modifications that this had to it. Then a week later, something else came out. And now...
Eventually we got to where I bought, this is the Happy model, Larva X, which does come with more aggressive props on it, these scimitar looking thingamabobs, which I broke, and also replaced with these little guys because they're a little less aggressively pitched, so they do work better for this.
Yeah, actually, let's talk about props, because we're going to talk about batteries, but everyone talks about batteries. Like, get a whole bunch of batteries. Get a whole bunch of props too.
Yes. You will break them.
Yeah, you will break props. So make sure that you get online and find props that work for your quad and get a whole bunch of extras. Where did you buy your quad through?
Amazon.
Amazon? Okay, so I got mine. Eachine only sells through Banggood, which means that I had to find the equivalent from a different brand props to replace these props without having to buy from Banggood again.
Now, conveniently, a lot of this standard design of the prop for these toothpicks, they all seem to be changed to this form factor from what I can gather on the internet. I could be wrong. Which makes these are pretty easy to buy in bulk, so you don't have to worry about that too much.
It's not difficult to do, just do it.
Yeah, and don't worry about getting the more expensive, less breakable props, because when you're flying in your house, it doesn't matter. They are going to break.
Yeah.
But another difference, yours is ducted.
Yeah.
So mine is not. There are still, this is another option in this category. There's still plenty of, the Mobula 7?
Mobula 7. Actually,
yeah.
Mobula 7 was recently replaced by the Mobula 6.
Oh. Well, now you know. And those are also ducted. And so I have found that when flying indoors, and the fact that you're probably going to hit things, it may actually be better to get a ducted one than a non-ducted one. And
this one's still for sale. And it gets cheaper every month because that's the way technology works.
It's true.
And I would still recommend it. If you have any questions about getting this thing fully up and running, leave a comment below. Batteries also. Talk about batteries. Make sure you get batteries. I was lucky enough that the battery that I decided to get as a replacement for this one, the 2S, fits snugly inside of the body for it.
Where this one has a battery strap that holds the batteries to it. So.
Which actually, yours is a lot more like just a tiny version of a full-size mini quad.
It is. It is.
Mine is not quite accepted its role as that yet.
This is also different than the first couple of runs of this quad. So there are some things, if you watch videos about it, that they make complaints that are different now. This little 3D printed thing, for example, is different than the original release. Just sweet.
Also, I specifically chose the trash can, and I specifically recommended the Larva based on the fact that Joshua Bardwell has absolutely for beginners videos on how to get both of these set up in beta flight, which
is a thing.
Yeah.
So learning how to use beta flight, and then I had to also learn how to connect to the BL Heli suite, which there are not many in-depth videos on that. There's, again, one person making videos about any of that content, so Zoe, thank you.
Quick shout out to Zoe. If you like this video, go and subscribe to Zoe FPV.
Yeah. So I like 3D flying, so it's like the source. But learning how to use those programs, connecting to your quad to do it, which is another time cables come up. Because you may not have a micro USB cable that is capable of both power and data transfer, which it needs to be able to do both.
That was my first problem, because I had a micro USB cable that did data but not power. So I had to have a battery plugged into my quad when I was updating its firmware.
Yeah. Which there are some things in beta, like even if you have one that can power on the everything else, the electronics, that you still need a battery for motor stuff, but irrelevant. You need a micro USB cable that can do both power and data transfer.
Right.
So really,
so,
it's just
don't take anything that I say as far as terminology as gospel, because it's not. I'm just sort of making it up as I go. But I can fly this thing.
So there you go. Yeah, I can make it move.
All right. So then you get a quad, and that at that point puts you in the air, which I'm going to point out. We have gone through learning how to solder, getting a transmitter, and all of the nonsense that went on with that, and a simulator, and then a quad, and then beta flight,
BL
Heli, all of that, and all of that getting you into the air. And I'm gonna crunch some numbers and put right here how much it costed me to get into the air, this method, and in front of you how much it costed you to get into the air with that method. And then, hey, that's much more than $50.
It is. It's significant. Oh, we haven't even talked about it.
Yeah, well, no, that's the next step.
Yeah.
Right. At this point, you're just doing line of sight.
Yes.
Flight. So please, do this. Save yourself some time.
Yeah.
Okay. So at this point, you are actually flying a real hobby grade quad, but you're flying it line of sight. So the next step is FPV, because if you're getting into the hobby, they aren't even sold without cameras anymore. So you can go two routes with this. You can go the dirt cheap route, which is what I did. We sat around discussing all of the different options, all the different ways to get the video signal from the quad to your eyes, right? Ultimately, you've got to have some form of receiver working on 5.8 gigahertz, which we'll discuss the importance of 5.8 gigahertz in a second. And then you've got to turn that into an image and put that image on your face. Cheapest way to do that, I personally really enjoyed this, mainly because it was cheap, but also because I like using my cell phone for everything. I'm using it to film this right now.
Yes, true. Yeah.
I like going for the super cheap cardboard goggle.
You made fun of me.
Eachine also makes these little receivers. They actually, this is not the one that I would buy now for the same purpose. They make another one with built-in diversity, which you'll hear a lot of people talk about. Basically, if you're trying to receive video, you want to have at least 2 antennas, right? That's the short version of what diversity is, 2 antennas. The more different they are, the better. But you get this, it's got a USB output. I've got some Velcro, I stuck it to the side of this, and I put it into my cell phone, and I put it on my face. I got an app that lets me FPV with this. The downside is I look like a goober with it. It's this giant box on the front of me, and I got my cell phone inside of it. And if I'm flying my quad and my wife calls me, then the quad crashes. But the whole thing works for this. The case and the receiver together was like $35. Yeah. So and no batteries required.
That's true. So the method that I ended up going with after much So I went with, at the time, a lot of videos were talking about these guys, the Sky Zone. So I went with the Sky Zone O2Cs. And when I did that, I did buy new antennas for it, and then I broke the patch antenna. So now I have this one back on here because Amazon hasn't delivered the patch antenna yet. Amazon. So I'll replace that at some point. But so I bought the goggles, which were on sale at the time for just a little under $300. And then I had to buy batteries because this doesn't come with any way to power it. Although it does come with a cable that connects to XD60. So I had to buy batteries for it. I had to buy antenna for it. And all of that did allow me to see the screen, but it's a lot more expensive.
So yeah, and I actually want to talk about that because as far as what goggles to buy, there's lots of videos on that, right? All over the internet. That's like there's like 5 or 6 different channels that like that's all they do, but they don't talk about the price a whole lot because realistically, the list price for all of the professional level goggles, right? Any goggles that's not going to make you look like a goober. The list price is always about $500. The real key, and there's not a whole lot of real difference between all of the major brands. The key is looking for deals. And I got mine. They're on their way here. It's probably going to take another 12 days because I noticed a really good deal on Banggood. And, you know, there's a lot of hate on Banggood because they're a Chinese supplier. But I got a set of not Sky Zone. I got a set of Amway
Commanders.
Amway.
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 Amway. Commander V1S goggles, which are a $500 goggle, for $175. And they are currently selling them for $189 as... Actually, I'm pretty sure that sale is going to end before I post this video, but either way, you know, keep your eyes out because they're high quality goggles. It's not like Amazon doesn't do deals too. Just both of us ended up going with pre-OLED.
Yes.
Yeah. So OLED screens became a hit thing this year. So that once again, the industry, the hobby is constantly changing. Completely digital systems are becoming a thing. So if you watch this video in like late 2020, it's possible that everything that we're talking about as far as
it's actually frustrating because when I was originally starting to look at this, I was looking at buying the digital options that existed at the time, like the ProSight or Connex ProSight and the Architect Next G1 and these things. And you know, you had to buy them, and then they came with a ground station thing to connect it, and then you had to connect that to your face, which is a whole separate thing. And then, like a month after I bought this, they were like, "Oh, DJI released an FPV goggle," and so I was like, "Oh my god, why?" So now I don't have those yet, but the hobby is changing a lot, right?
Actually, I also want to talk about the difference in transmissions too. Talked earlier about the 5.8 gigahertz, why that's important. Technically, to transmit on 5.8 gigahertz, you are supposed to be a licensed amateur radio operator, which I still recommend people get that certification.
It's not that hard.
It's not hard. And you learn a lot about the safety of high energy radio broadcasts as a result of it. And if you're a qualified amateur, you can join ARIES or races, depending on where you are, which is an emergency communication service. All that's great. Transmitting, flying FPV on 5.8 gigahertz without that license is technically an FCC violation, which is a felony.
What are you in here for?
The digital systems are all Part 15 compliant, which... Part 15 compliant, if you haven't noticed, you ever pick up any toy that transmits anything digitally, it will say somewhere on it, Part 15 compliant, right? Your wireless controllers for your console say Part 15 compliant. Your Bluetooth headset says on it Part 15 compliant.
Yep. This device complies with Part 15 of the FCC rules.
Right, and you can look up what Part 15 is. Here's the short version. You can use it.
Yeah.
That's what it means. Right. Part 15 means that you don't have to be licensed. It's Part 15 means the FCC checked it out and they're like, hey,
it's good, bro.
It's good. So yeah. So the digital systems, because they don't operate on 5.8 gigahertz, they are Part 15 compliant, which means once they become the standard thing, that need to become ham radio certified will go away.
Yeah.
So
until then, follow the FCC regulations.
Yeah. FCC. All right, and at this point, you're ready to fly.
Yeah. FPV.
So, these are the lessons that we have learned in the order that we recommend doing things. You're at this point, you've got everything you need. Just take your tiny quad out. And by the way, the tiny quads, the toothpick class, used to be for indoor use. Now that they're running on 2S and 3S lipos, they are
plenty powerful,
right?
Yeah.
You can, they're UAV Futures. I mean, the first time he was shocked by it was the trash can. He has a video where he's flying the trash can outside in high winds, and he's talking about how it feels just like a full-size quad. There's all kinds of power in the tiny quad, so you can fly them outside, and you don't even have to worry about all the FAA stuff that goes on with bigger quads. And when you step into that, it becomes way more expensive.
Yeah.
So, fly. Yeah, this is weird because this is going to be the only video. At the time that this goes up, this should be the only video on my channel where I don't do anything dangerous. I can actually say, do these things. If you enjoyed this video, do not like or subscribe it. Turn off your cell phone or your computer and go do something.
No, you can like and subscribe and then do those things.
You can, but then you're just going to get sucked in.
Got to get another one that already liked it. So might as well leave a comment below about other things you'd like to see in the future.
Or you can go to the Mr. Steele or Joshua Bardwell videos and leave a comment that has a link to this video in their videos.
Exactly.
So, you know.
See, two Joe Schmoes. What do you got to say about that, Mr. Steele?
Hey, Mr. Steele, fix that for you.
Yeah.